In 1943, the Nazi regime's lethal assault on the Jewish people was in full force. At the Plaszow slave labor camp, Commandant Amon Geth gave free rein to his murderous impulses. And yet, despite this brutal environment, Oskar Schindler spent many festive evenings in Geth's villa overlooking the camp.
Oskar was able to drink with the devil, to make deals with the devil. And that's because there was a lot of the devil in him as well. If Oskar hadn't been that particular blend of satyr and black marketeer and drunk and savior, he couldn't have saved them. He had to be that particular blend of contradictions to be a savior in a world where all values were upside down.
To Helen Jonas Rosenzweig, a Jewish maid at Geth's villa, Schindler's close relationship with Geth and his concern for Jews was confusing.
Oskar Schindler came down into the kitchen and he took me to the window. He says, "You see the people down the hill? They carried stone, they were digging the hill." He said, "Look at them, watch them. You see people in Egypt, you Jewish people, when they were enslaved, and then they were freed from Egypt. This is what's going to happen to you. You will see. You're going to be free from that hell."
Schindler soon began to make good on his promise by taking advantage of his close relationship with Geth and other high-ranking Nazis. Schindler received permission to build a barracks camp next to Amalia. He'd convinced them that his Jews would work harder and longer if they didn't have to commute from Plaszow. The workers themselves benefited as well. They were now out of Geth's deadly jurisdiction.
Those people really were saved from beating, hanging, killing that was taking place in Camp Plaszow.
Amalia was now a self-contained concentration camp. That made Oskar Schindler the director of a concentration camp. Nonetheless, he provided extra food, medical care, and other necessities that were unheard of in other camps. These special services were expensive, but Schindler could afford them. He was making a fortune on the black market, selling surplus items from his factory. Under German law, Schindler's black market activities were illegal, but so was his humane and cordial treatment of his Jewish workers.
On one occasion, he had his birthday party, and some of the inmates baked a cake, and a little girl, a young girl, took it up to the office and gave it to him. So he gave her a kiss. And this, of course, was a major crime during that period of time.
Schindler was subsequently arrested. It was one of 3 separate arrests, but he was able to talk and bribe his way out of all of them. He was playing a dangerous game.
This is a big operation. He does it openly. He, as a German citizen, is violating their laws openly. He does it at great personal risk and great personal expense, and finally, with no expectation of reward.
In the spring of 1944, Schindler and his Jews had to adapt to changes in the war. The Russians had been steadily advancing on the Eastern Front, and the Germans were retreating. The Nazis ordered all camps and subcamps in Plaszow and Krakow be emptied of their workers. Schindler could have easily walked away a wealthy man at that point, but he knew what would happen to his Jews if he did. Instead, Schindler went to Berlin, where he received authorization to move his Jewish factory workers to a new location in Brinlitz, a town nearby his boyhood home of Svitau. He convinced the Nazis that his new factory would manufacture ammunition by getting his activities and Jews reclassified as essential to the war effort. He hoped to spare his workers from the gas chambers at Auschwitz. Everyone who would go to Brünnlitz with Oskar Schindler had to get on his list, a list that meant life. The Jews called it simply Schindler's List. Some 1,100 workers were lucky enough to get their names on it. They were Jews from Schindler's Amalia factory as well as the Plaszow labor camp. Schindler was even able to make good on his promise to Goethe's maid.
He said, give me the names of your sisters. And that's how my sisters came along with me. The names were put on a list. I really didn't know about the list.
The Jews on Schindler's List didn't go directly to Brünnlitz. There were two frightening detours. At first, the 801 men were routed to the Gross-Rosen death camp. 300 women were sent to Auschwitz. When they saw the smoke billowing out of its chimneys, they understood the camp's deadly purpose.
They put us in the shower room and are standing there quite some time till we know what is going to come down, or it's going to come down water, or it's going to come down gas. Are we going to get killed? Are we going to get gassed? We didn't know. That was the most horrible minutes. I don't know how long it was. For me, it was very, very long, but it probably wasn't long. But every minute was a year. And then came water. It came water.
Schindler knew all too well he had to get his Jews out of Gross-Rosen and Auschwitz. 2 of the women had already died there. In this rare interview clip, Schindler explains how he saved his Jews from a fate that so many others had met.
Da habe ich ungefähr 4 Wochen gekämpft. Die waren inzwischen mit anderen nach Auschwitz transportiert.
It was a struggle to get the women out of Auschwitz. It was a miracle that I had them released after 4 weeks, with a list of names. Naturally, it required interventions, telegrams, and journeys to Berlin and Auschwitz.
Es würde zu weit führen, wenn man die Details diesen Kampf.
We arrived, the men from Gross-Rosen arrived in beginning of November. By the end of November of 1944, he brought the women from Auschwitz, the 298. And he said to, I remember like this was yesterday, thank God you are with me. Hot soup is waiting for you.
In the months to come, Oskar Schindler's increasing humanitarian efforts on behalf of his Jewish workers would far eclipse any endeavors toward personal gain.